So first I'd like to introduce the Deputy Chiefs behind me. Deputy Chief John Hayes over Patrol Services, Deputy Chief Victoria Pearson, who is out today, Deputy Chief Sidney Collier, who's in charge of our support services, and Deputy Chief Albert Stokes, who is our Deputy Chief in charge of business services. Next slide. This is the rest of the team. Major Sybil Elamine is my Chief of Staff. Major Ronnie Armstead is in charge of support services. Major Daryl Goins is in charge of business services. Acting Major Don Davenport is in charge of patrol services. And Director Spencer Cochran is in charge of special projects. We've been getting a lot of interest on our officer involved shooting that took place earlier this year. I wanted to give the community an update on some of the facts and identify the officer involved. So after a security review, we're going to announce that the officer who was involved in that shooting is Sergeant Cody Adams. He has been with the Richmond Police Department since 2014. He's currently a sergeant serving in 3rd Precinct and is also a member of our police SWAT team. Something else that I couldn't discuss initially because the search warrant was sealed, Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has unsealed the inventory from what was seized from the house. So I spoke about the gun that the suspect had at the time. What I was unable to discuss last time was what was actually seized from the house pursuant to that first search warrant. So we had 1,300 grams of cocaine, 140 grams of pressed fentanyl pills, 28 grams of powder fentanyl, 6 pounds of cannabis, 1 tactical shotgun, 1 AR rifle, 2 AR pistols, 2 regular handguns, and a total of 5 magazines. So 7 guns all in all. 1 from the suspect that was in his hand at the time of the shooting, and then 6 that were seized pursuant to that first search warrant. And now I'll move into the crime for 2022. So some of the benefits we had last year, some of the good things we can talk about is a significant reduction in murder. In 2021 we had 90 murders. Last year we had 59, so that's a 34% reduction. We also saw great strides in robberies, so for a 17% reduction in robberies. We did have an uptick in rape, aggravated assault, and robberies of commercial, but overall we were flat in violent crime. We go to the next slide. So one of the things I did want to talk about was non-fatal shooting, and it may seem counterintuitive to have a great reduction in murder, which the vast majority of our murders are involving firearms, while seeing more victims of gunfire. So that's up 5%. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the plans we put in place for the 4th quarter. So we were on track to have a much higher increase in non-fatal shootings. We're in the double digits, but through the work of in the final quarter, we had a 12% reduction in non-fatal shootings, which got us to that point of a plus 5%, but we were on track for much higher. If you go to the next slide, we'll look at multiple shooting victims. In 2022, we had 33 incidents involving 80 victims. We had 1 shooting on Broad Street that you may remember, where we had 6 individuals shot and wounded. We had another shooting on Broad Rock Boulevard in South Richmond where 5 people were shot. And we had multiple triple and double shootings as well that led to that number. So you could have 33 incidents with 80 victims. And last year we had 33 incidents with 68 victims. So that kind of shows where we're seeing the uptick in those non-fatal shootings. Go to the next slide. Whenever I go to community meetings, I mention this, and I realize that many people in our community are unaware of this auto sear, or what's commonly referred to as Glock switches. This is a small device that you can put on a normal Glock handgun, and it turns it into, if you can see the back part right there, it turns what is semi-automatic pistol into a fully automatic pistol. So these devices are in circulation. They're illegally, they modified the gun. They can be plastic. We've seen individuals printing those on 3D printers, and we've also seen them in metal. And it turns that pistol into, like I said, a fully automatic gun. We've seized 12 of those this past year, and I fear that we're going to seize more. If you go to the next slide. This is an example. This was an arrest that we had in 2021 where our officers encountered this individual, Marquise Bowman, age 23 of Sandston. He was arrested after a traffic stop with these items. And if you see that Glock firearm, on the back of that Glock had a auto sear on it or a switch and a large drum magazine. and he was arrested for the possession of those weapons and sentenced to 92 months in federal prison. The ATF adopted that case for us after the traffic stop, and it's just a good example of the type of firepower that is on our streets and how we addressed it, and a good result. So next slide. So our violence reduction efforts, I've talked about this previously. In the summer, we were tasked with coming up with a plan from June 1st to September 2nd for violent crime interruption for the summer. We focused on key areas. We broke the city down into 29,000 micro areas from 1 to 3 blocks, and we looked at 5 different crimes that we believe were indicators of murder. So we look at obviously murder with firearms, shooting into occupied dwelling, shooting into occupied vehicle, robbery shooting, and aggravated assault where a person's shot non-fatally. And when our crime analysts looked at that data, they rank ordered all of these 29,000 blocks and came up with the 25 hottest blocks, and we spent a lot of resources there. The majority of those locations were in Creighton, Wickham, Fairfield, Hillside, Gilpin, and Mosby, Belt Atlantic Apartments. And when we focused on those individuals with a 3-pronged process, we saw in the greater, the biggest dip we had was in First Precinct. When we focused on those areas, 19 of those locations of the top 25 were in First Precinct. We saw a 73% reduction in murder, 27% reduction in murder in these specific neighborhoods. In the Belt Atlantic Apartments, 33% reduction, and an overall homicide reduction in the city. We saw the after effects of that for a negative 54% just during that time period. So we think that's what catapulted us into having a better year this year than we did in 2022. Next slip. So this is a tip that we received from the community where we had some of our 3rd Precinct's officers got a call for what is a temporary setup in a business where people were selling cannabis. When the officers went there, they found what was essentially an open-air marijuana shop, obviously illegal. 167 pounds of cannabis was seized, 7.5 pounds of mushrooms, thousands of edibles, that's obviously THC edibles, $65,000 in cash, and a total of 9 weapons. And you can see the hardware that was seized from there. So these are individuals who are selling large amounts of illegal drugs, and they have to have weapons to provide security for that. So that investigation's ongoing, but that's another good example of just getting a tip from a citizen and us following up on it and making that good arrest and that seizure. Next slide. You can't talk about our violence crime plan without discussing the detectives of Operation Red Ball or the SVIU. And from this year, I want to just talk about some of the cases or the stats. So 235 felony arrests, 167 misdemeanor arrests, 111 warrants, and 338 firearms seized. Now that's an important number because if you go to the next slide, you'll see why it is. We have 8 detectives in that unit. They accounted for 32% of all the guns seized by the Richmond Police Department last year. We had a total of 1,047 guns seized citywide, and during Red Ball, 338 of those were seized. This is a good example of great detectives leveraging technology, working with members of the community to get information, and really doing a yeoman's work to make our city safer. Next slide. But it's not all enforcement. One of the things we recognized in 2020 in First Precinct was we were seeing an increase of domestic violence, escalating domestic violence. So we would go back to the same address time and time again. It may start as a simple assault, end up as an aggravated assault. So we created a unit with these 2 officers, Officer Alexander and Officer Hall, called the Divert Unit. They review reports from domestic violence every morning, look at those cases, arrest offenders who are outstanding warrants, follow up with the victims to see. They have partners with all kind of nonprofits to help those victims of those domestic violence situations. And we've been able to reduce domestic violence in First Precinct by 10%. And in that specific sector, 113, where they're based out of, it's been 44%. That's where we're seeing it. The same addresses, the same. Next week, we're seeing the same kind of crime that was escalating, and we tried to interdict it. And we're looking to repeat that citywide and build on that as our staffing grows. Next slide. The negative part about our crime for 2022 is property crime. So when you look at it, we had an 87% increase in arson, 22% in larceny, which includes theft from buildings, motor vehicles, and motor vehicle parts. Auto thefts were up 22%, burglaries up 12% for an overall property crime increase of 22%. And if you go to the next slide, what's driving that more than any of those, not just percentage-wise, but sheer number of crimes, is this, theft from motor vehicles. So you look at, that's by far our biggest crime. So in 2022, we had 2,362 items stolen out of cars, and that's a 39% increase over the 2021 total of 1,694. If you go to the next slide, this is the most concerning part of it. In 2022, 714 firearms were taken out of cars, which is a 73% increase over the previous year of 413. In the vast majority of these cases, there are multiple, or these cars are unlocked, left unsecured. Sometimes the guns are even left in plain view. So that number is totally unacceptable for us. It's what we're going to have to ask our community to really be cognizant of, to not leave your guns in the car, to at least lock them up and then secure them. Obviously we believe the Second Amendment's a right for everyone, but it's also a responsibility when you own a firearm, because those 714 guns, just by the very nature that they were stolen, ended up in the hands of criminals. Next slide. This is where these theft from motor vehicles are coming from the firearms. You can see right there, based in Shockoe Bottom, also Old Town Manchester and Manchester, Scott's Addition. What those places have in common for us is that's where our population growth in Richmond is occurring. So we have apartment buildings going up in those neighborhoods, more people coming from outside that maybe don't understand what they need to do to live in a city environment. And I can't stress it enough, when we talk about community policing, part of that is we need the community to listen to us when we stress how important it is to secure your weapons. Next slide. The other driver we've seen is catalytic converter thefts. We've talked about that ad nauseum, and now this is something that I can tell you that the community has done a really good job at, and some of it's really hard for us to defend against. But we did see an increase of 691 over 553 last year for a 25% increase. You can see the heat maps of where those are occurring as well too. And the next slide I'd like to talk about. I want to take this opportunity to thank Officer Jeff Urban from 2nd Precinct. When we were talking about this problem, that's him right there. He had done some research and found that there were programs around the country where police departments were painting catalytic converters, different colors. So the recyclers would know, it's very hard to tell if it's stolen because there's no VIN on it, but the recyclers would know if it were painted a certain color, where it was stolen from, and that it was stolen, and they can say no to it. And we've even had video evidence of people going up under cars, seeing it painted, and then deciding to not steal that, thinking there's going to be something to it. So we had we partnered with Mark Smith of Midas, and one of the things we wanted to track was from January 1st to October 31st, we were averaging 70 catalytic converters stolen per month. After this campaign, we saw that drop to 25 per month, and we're holding steady at that. So we want to keep that message out there. Mark is still painting catalytic converters for people, and you just have to make an appointment, and we think that's a good way for us to try to mitigate some of these thefts, which are really organized. And these are some of the partners we worked with on that media campaign. So Ashland Police, Chesterfield, Colonial Heights, Hanover, Henrico, Midas, Napa, National Insurance Crime Bureau, obviously RPD, the University of Richmond Police, VCU PD, and Virginia DMV, and of course Virginia State Police. And like I said, this is another crime that's driving it. Motor vehicle thefts, 943, up from 739 for a 28% increase. Almost all of I can't even think of on a hand of how many cars are hot-wired in Richmond, or they are almost all stolen with keys. Either the keys are left in the car, the keys are stolen from some other situation, or the car's left running. So another thing we're asking from the community is for folks to be mindful of their car. Don't leave it running in the morning. Certainly don't leave it unattended when you run into a store. That's how thieves are getting these cars. Next slide. We partnered with these other agencies too for the Love My Ride auto theft prevention campaign. One of the things I hammered home in July is that auto theft isn't just about stealing a car. One of the things we see is that violent offenses are used often when with a stolen car. So it's not just that someone's stealing a valuable asset of yours. It could be used in a much more dangerous crime. Next slide. I just want to give a shout out to our Special Operations Division. Last year we had 47 events planned and were safely executed in the city of Richmond. Anything from marches to parades to the marathon and other races. And that's all done by a very small group, organized by a very small group within the Special Operations Division with support from Richmond police officers in patrol and detectives who have to come in on their day off to support these events. But we know it's important for our city to have events, and we're happy to support it. We already have 38 commitments to date in 2023, and I won't be surprised if there's many more after that. Next slide. So this is the community response team. These are individuals that was launched on August 15th. It's a partnership between the RPD and Richmond Behavioral Health, where we partner a sworn police officer with one of our certified clinicians from RBHA. They respond to mental health calls for service. It's an alternative to arrests, and they provide wraparound services. So they responded to 227 calls. 92% of those calls involved those officers not making an arrest, but connecting those individuals to other resources. So it's a fledgling program. We hope to be able to expand it to other teams. Right now there's 2 teams, but we'd love more. We think the program is working, and it's saving some of the patrol officers on the street from having to answer those calls they would normally be dispatched to. So next slide. So for the overall, all of our crime, when you combine property crime and violent crime, it's our major crime rate, which is up 19%. Next slide. So this is a time where I want to look ahead for what we're doing in 2023. So next slide. In October, we created a new mission statement for RPD. I'll let you guys read that. But that is something that I thought was important for us to give our officers guidance on what we expect from them. And on that same vein, if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about the RPD core values, and I'll read these. The first value, in no particular order, is employee health, wellness, and morale. We can have all the great plans we want, but if we don't have our officers feeling comfortable and excited and motivated to do this job, it's not going to matter. Rebuilding trust and legitimacy. That is one of the most important things I can say too, because the community has to view their law enforcement as legitimate. If not, we're going to be viewed as an occupying army. We're not going to get people to talk to us. We're not going to get our ability to get our message out there, and we're not going to be able to solve crime without the help of the community. So we have to be viewed as legitimate, and part of that is being transparent and open and making sure we treat everyone with dignity and respect. Secondarily, or third, the public safety through community engagement. And you'll see some slides on that in the future. One of the things we started in the summer gun violence program was community engagement, pop-ups. Many of you attended some of those events. Those are great opportunities for our officers and other city agencies and federal and state agencies to come in and meet our public where they are when there's not crime scene tape up. That's so important for us to be able to forge those relationships when there's not a tragedy that has just occurred. Innovation through technology, and we'll talk about that a little later as well. But we know that we're short-staffed. We're authorized for 755 officers. Right now we have 606, and we're trying to build that back. But in the meantime, we need to leverage all the technology we can to make our officers more effective and more efficient. And then finally, community policing through strategic planning and evidence-based research. That's what we're continuing right now, looking at the data, putting our officers in the places where they're needed the most at the right times. And that's not only the best way for us to police when we're short-staffed, it's the fairest way. Next slide. So obviously, it's no secret that we lost a lot of officers to surrounding jurisdictions and who have left the profession in general. One of the things we're pushing is to get some of those officers back. It's a very simple process for them to be rehired with us, whether they left and went to another police department or whether they're coming from the private sector after leaving us. So we have 11 of those officers back. I just signed off on 2 of them last night, for 2 more to come. There's 2 more in the pipeline. So we're calling these individuals, telling them that this is a great place to work, that the Richmond Police Department's back, and that we're going to start winning again, and we're getting those officers excited. The benefit of that is we still need to hire the recruit classes. We still need those young folks coming out of the military, coming out of college to be the next generation of the police. But that's not going to catch up to us. That's going to take 8 months before they're able to really hit the streets. These are folks that know the city of Richmond, that have policed here, that aren't going to be, that we know them and we can put them in the right position to be successful. And after 2 weeks of recertification training, they're back patrolling our streets. So I'm pleased to announce that, and we're hoping for many more of our returning officers. Next slide. We had a great group of individuals graduate the 125th basic recruit class. Really interesting and diverse backgrounds of all of them. Really cool stories, and we're going to have one for you next.
Hamid, we're playing with the community cup today. Glad to be here. Enjoy playing soccer. Enjoy being here. It's been one hell of a journey. Wait until the graduation day so I can get back to the community that has been supporting us. This is what it's all about. It's the love and support that we get. It's a beautiful. I haven't even graduated yet, and I can already see the bound that we have as a family. Whether it's a police officer that teaches class, an instructor, or a recruit, it's a great family bonding. I didn't grow up in the U.S. I'm from Iraq. I was born and raised in Iraq. Lived in a few different countries. No place have felt like home to me, just like Richmond City has. It has given me so much. It's time for us to get back to our community. It's all been love and support. Everybody's like, oh great, you know, you're gonna graduate, you're gonna be in the police academy. What precinct do you want to work in? Everybody, the community, the friends, everybody's like, what precinct? Where are you gonna work? So we can talk. So far, we've seen great support from our leadership and from our community. On top of that, the race that we got a few months ago, that was amazing. I highly recommend Richmond City.
So that goes to my philosophy with all of our officers, even the recruits. We're all recruiters, and we're constantly talking with people, whether they're former RPD or whether they're in the community, whether they're doing a job that maybe they're just not really happy about and they want to change. Call us. We'll give you a mission. We'll give you a purpose. You will find fulfillment in this work. It's meaningful work and it's honorable work when it's done properly. So next slide. To speak to that, we have a couple of openings. It's not just, you don't have to have a badge and a gun to fight crime in our city. So we're hiring crime analysts. They're the detectives who help our sworn personnel be more effective and more efficient. And we're also hiring a director of technology. Like I said, we want that person. If anyone here knows someone who's a great IT person that wants to be a part of a great team, call us, because we need that. We need to leverage all the resources we can to be more effective. Next slide. Celebrating cultural diversity. One of the things when I talk to the recruits, the 12 that we just hired, the 12 that are in there now, and the ones that we just hired, is one of the reasons they chose Richmond is it's not only a diverse city, but we're a diverse police department. So we have police officers from all walks of life. It's a great environment, and we celebrate it. So this is some of our personnel, like I said, playing soccer. Next slide. This is the Native American dance celebration that we had with some of our Native employees. We did a Spanish language event for greetings for the holidays, and then we attended the Virginia Asian Chamber Gala. Deputy Chief Hayes was there and had a great time. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. All right. I'd also like to take this opportunity, if you go to the next slide. Oh, all right, I'll let that go. That's where it was. I thought it was, the Lord telling me something. So I was like, is everyone else hearing that? Anyway, so we've assigned a new LGBTQ plus community liaison, Captain Kim Mooney. She currently is working in our DRO, but she's taken on this assignment, and this connects to our LGBTQ plus community for public safety and other events. She's going to build relationships with that community and be a go-between for us and that community that is sometimes felt marginalized by law enforcement. And we've had that position for a while, and we're excited to see what Kim's going to bring to it as well. Next slide. We also have an Asian Pacific Islander community liaison. That's Officer Fawn Hansoon. She's the same kind of scenario. She is a direct connection with that community that as we may know, has suffered tragedies in California recently with the mass shootings, and that is a community that needs a tight bond with law enforcement, and we're looking to be that great partner. Next slide. something that we talk about, the core values. Morale is a big key of that, and I always take the opportunity to thank City Council, the mayor, the CAO for getting the Richmond Police Department pay raises. That's important. We have to be competitive with pay, but more than that, we have to acknowledge the great work that our officers do. Sometimes in law enforcement, as leaders, we're trained to look for the mistakes and find those times where they messed up, but it's also important for us to acknowledge when they're doing something great. So this is something we do with quarterly awards, the officer of the quarter, the problem solver of the quarter, and the sergeant of the quarter. We've been acknowledging that great work on a quarterly basis, and it's really important to get that recognition to those individuals, as well as get them in front of their families and to be shown the awesome work that's occurring. And secondarily, we had a RPD salute to excellence earlier in the year. So that's where we had 100 sworn and civilian honorees there. The mayor was there, and it was just a great event for our troops. Next slide. And some of you were in attendance at the Valor Awards, the 100 Club that sponsors the RVA Valor Awards. I can just say that, that was the first time I was giving awards to our officers in my current role, and I couldn't have been prouder of some of the stories of heroism that was shown that day. And to those of you that were there, it was incredible stories. It actually almost made me think, some people looking at it might not want to come to Richmond, because it showed the dangerous situations that our men and women put themselves in every day and risk it all in lives, not just for each other, but for this community that they love so much. So very proud of them. Next slide. I'd also like to announce we had a Chaplains Faith Leaders Academy this year. That's 8 weeks, and we got 10 community faith leaders to join us. They were graduates of that academy. They not only help support us internally when we have a tragedy, which we've experienced, to support our officers, but they respond out to homicide scenes with us and can lend support to the grieving families and victims, and are such a great liaison to us to the community as well. So and here are some of the churches that they represent, and we're just so proud of those individuals, and we hope that we can find even more, because it's such a positive program. Next thing we want to talk about is our community walks. We just completed one earlier this week in Sector 313, and we have the rest of these 4 planned per sector. So this is an opportunity for us to engage with the community, talk about crime trends. In Sector 313, the crime trend that we discussed with the community was package theft. They were experiencing a lot of package thefts, and we were able to talk about ways they can mitigate that. But it was just a great opportunity for us to engage with our community, like I said before, without a tragedy occurring first. So we're always looking for those opportunities. Next slide, the Citizens Academies. We graduated the 34 Citizen Police Academy. Not only is it beneficial for us because we get to sell our message and people get to know what policing's about, but some of these individuals are going to serve on our accident review board, on our use of force review board internally. And with that, they have an understanding of what policing is. So they go through training, they go through ride-alongs, and again, that's where we're looking to recruit folks to say, hey, this is what the Richmond Police Department's about, and if you're interested, please join us. So we thank Donald Cook for really organizing that. He's done an excellent job. Summer pop-ups, many of you have attended those. This is the first one we had in Belt Atlantic Apartments. Are you dancing there, Ronnie? Go back. Yeah, I think you're in the middle of a dance, but all right, sorry about that. Next slide. This is Mosby Court, another great event for us. If you go to the next slide, this is Gilpin. We had a tremendous turnout in Gilpin as our 3rd one, and the word really got out there, where it was just packed with people. It was so successful that members of the city wanted to see us attend a pop-up in our Latino communities, so we picked Southwood. So we picked this location and engaged with a community that sometimes might be a bit fearful of law enforcement. And it's a great opportunity for us to sell our message, to explain why we're there, that we're the police department for everybody, regardless of what your passport says, regardless of where you're from. We want these individuals to call us and partner with us so that we can make Richmond safer. And it was just awesome dealing with the kids there. And then finally, we ended with Ann Hardy Park, where we had a trunk or treat. Another awesome opportunity for us to engage with our community and have a great experience. So next slide. We have the next one coming up. We wanted to get past the cold. We're going to do it March 30th, 5 p.m. Mount Olivet. Baptist Church. Bishop Husband was nice enough to let us use his parking lot. So we're going to have that date, and we'll release that to the media, and everyone's obviously welcome to come there. This is a neighborhood that is experiencing some challenges and growth, and we're focusing on that area to try to make it safer for folks. And we're looking, we're looking to just start that back up, and we'll continue that on a monthly basis going forward, and we'll make sure we keep everyone in the loop on that. Next slide. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the strategy that we've been discussing. So it's a three-pronged approach of focused deterrence. Every time I go to a community meeting, I ask people if they know what a hotspot curve is. And some people are saying, oh, I see that on my phone on the active calls for service, but I never knew what it was. Well, what I always try to explain to them is a self-generated hotspot visit. So like I said, we've identified the hotspots in the neighborhoods. We have these officers mark out there for 10 to 15 minutes. Studies have shown that it deters crime. The criminals see the officer out there in these challenging neighborhoods, and they move on. But something else I'm really interested in is that the good folks get to see our officers in these communities and feel safer. There's a big part of, whenever I talk to communities, the numbers, their eyes glaze over. It's how they feel about whether or not they feel safe. So this is another tactic that, number one, is measurable. It's something we can set goals for where there's no negative to it. Like I can tell you that I'll never set a goal for traffic stops for our officers. I'll never set a goal for arrests or gun seizures. We know where that can lead if we start making those goals. But our sector lieutenants can give goals to our officers on where they want them to mark out in these events and deter crime. So part of that is the steady blue lights. All of our officers that have now some of them don't accommodate that tactic anymore, but you should be seeing blue lights, the steady blue lights on as our officers are patrolling. Those lights have been shown to be visible for up to 2 blocks and can really create a sense of security for those around it. We're doing outdoor roll calls. That's where we take our normal meetings that we have in the building and take it to a hot spot where we're experiencing crime. So we have those officers do the same kind of meeting. They're talking about the crime trends from the previous night. They're talking about their assignments. They're giving out their vehicles and beat locations while they're in the community. So it's that opportunity for us to connect with folks, and it creates that sense of security. And we're doing more traffic enforcement. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's nothing better as far as deterrent strategies and mobility than having officers on horses and having officers on bikes. And that's something that we want to keep getting back to as the weather gets better. And I know people love that. One of the things that the secondary part of the strategy is focusing on these sticky areas where crime has been consistent over years. And it's called Place Network Investigation. Through the Public Safety Partnership, of which Richmond is a part of, Myself and Major Elamine took some training in Denver, Colorado, where we talked with police departments from around the country who have implemented this strategy. And it's finding these historical places where the crime keeps occurring year after year and trying to figure out why it's staying there. So we're working on that. Each precinct has selected an area, and we're hoping to make some results in that. And then when you look at it, you realize why the crime's there, the convergence settings, comfort spaces, what makes criminals feel comfortable in that area versus another area, and also what's a corrupting spot. So if there's an issue there involving a certain business that may be allowing drug dealers to set up shop in the business or something like that. Some of the reason why that area is consistently a problem, and we're working on that. And finally, looking at finding those other stakeholders with collaborative ways to work through different community events and multi-sector investigations. So, I'm sorry, if you go to the next, where are we at? All right. So focused deterrence, this is, like I said, this is just examples of what we're talking about. I've already reviewed that. And like I said, these areas are located based upon crime analysis. So it's based on those 4 things we talked about, and we identified those 40 locations throughout the city, 10 in each precinct. Next slide. And here's the slide for, Place Network Investigations. It's based on our approach. It's 4 city locations. We collaborate with other partners, and it's been shown to sustain crime reduction if it's done properly. Next slide. We talked about the use of technology. So license plate recognition is a technology that we've deployed this year that we're already seeing good results from. The company that we utilize is called Flock Safety System. It delivers unbiased investigative leads. It helps solve all kinds of crime that involves a car. And we currently have 36 cameras right now. And our officers can use their city-issued cell phone, get alerts of stolen cars. It can give us alerts on Amber Alerts, where a missing child may be. And then also our detectives can utilize it after an incident occurred to see which cars have left the scene. So it's a really valuable tool and a force multiplier for us, and it's a part of our strategy by leveraging technology to fight crime. Next slide. Another part of that is we went live with our NIBIN machine. So the Richmond Police Department, in partnership with the ATF, has a NIBIN machine where all of our firearms are tested. 1,611 firearms have been tested since its inception. It takes days to get them back, not even, where if we were to send that to the Department of Forensic Science, the state lab, it could come back 4 to 6 months. And by the time you get those leads, and what it is every time a semi-automatic pistol or rifle fires a gun, the cartridge case is ejected. We match the microscopic details on that cartridge case to others. It's almost like a fingerprint and very similar in how it's used. And then it links to other crimes. And I have a pretty good example of that. Many of you may remember we put a press release out on one of our officers in South Richmond being shot at as he was driving by in his police vehicle. They shot into the door, shot out the window. Luckily, the officer involved was not injured. And later, 4 minutes after that incident, there was a significant crash involving Kevon Johnson, maybe 4 miles away. And while officers were investigating that, they found a rifle which was consistent with with those casings. Within 1 day, we were able to match the casings from the crime scene to that rifle found at the crash scene and link them together. We were able to use that to charge Kevon Johnson with attempted capital murder of a law enforcement officer, use of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a previously convicted felon. And like I said, we had some leads on that, but the video can be grainy. There's other things that maybe didn't quite match up, but we're able to put that rifle in at that original crime scene, then 4 minutes later at the crash site. So that is just a perfect example, and there are many others I could go into. The benefit of NIBIN is only in as timely as it is. So we need quick turnaround on those cases, and with our own NIBIN machine, we're starting to get that. I mentioned the National Public Safety Partnership. So some of the things that we're doing with that, that is a program from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Richmond was selected out of several cities in 2021 to be a part of it. We travel across the country to go to other police departments to learn how they do things. We have subject matter experts come to Richmond to help us. Some of the things that I've asked them to do is conduct a non-fatal shooting review. So they brought in 5 subject matter experts from around the country to evaluate our non-fatal shooting team. That's obviously where we saw the increase this year. And 99% of all non-fatal shootings are just attempted murders. It's just luck that they didn't die or the skill of a surgeon in one of our great hospitals. But the intent is the same. So we wanted to see how we could better put our detectives in the best position to be successful in those specific investigations, and we're seeing results with that. We also had a crime analysis assessment. I can't tell you how important it is for us to look at our data to make sure it's timely and probative. And we're seeing that we got an evaluation for that, and we're going to start making some changes based on those recommendations. It was very helpful. The other thing we're asking for is an assessment of our IT infrastructure. That's on the list. And the reason I've asked to do that, we talked about it publicly, we want to stand up a real-time crime center in Richmond. I think that's going to be a great tool for us. It's very complicated, but some of the things we learned from our PSP visits to other cities who have already gone down that road is they said, make sure you understand how your infrastructure works, because you could be buying these programs from companies that are going to sell it to you, but you may not have the IT to support it. So that was a great example of not wasting the taxpayers' money on a program that we can't support before we know what we can support. And finally, we've had 5 peer exchanges. I mentioned I went to Denver with Major LME. We went to Cleveland. We went to Phoenix. I think we went to Charlotte and maybe one other city, but we get to learn from our peers in other cities. We don't have to reinvent the wheel to be successful, and I think that's what we're learning. And we have another 2 years in PSP, and we know we're going to make the most out of it. Next slide. So these are our traffic checkpoints. We had 8 safety checkpoints in 2022. Over 1,500 vehicles were checked, 62 violations of inspection, 8 vehicles were towed, and 128 arrests were based upon that. And it was all based on the high injury network. Again, using the data where our crashes are most significant, and whether it's significant injury or fatalities, that's where we had these safety checkpoints, and we're going to have more going forward. Next slide. On December 17th, we started a traffic plan that's going to be trying to address speed, aggressive driving, pedestrian safety, distracted driving, and impaired driving. Everyone in Richmond knows the homicide number. That's the number we always talk about. It was 59 last year. It was 90 the year before. It was 66 the previous. It was 60 the year before that. We know that number. That's something Richmonders always remember. But one number I don't think is familiar is the folks who die from vehicle crashes. So this year we had a 15-year high of people killed in crashes. 28 individuals lost their lives, including a young girl, 17-year-old girl on Sims Avenue in the prime of her life, died in a crash. So we have a role in that. There's certain roles with lighting and traffic engineering that play a part in that, but the police department has a role in enforcing speeding as well, and people respond to incentives. So it's important for us, and that's why we started this plan, to try to make sure that our officers who are radar certified are back out there trying to address some of these. So since it started, hold on, I may just work off this. Since it started, 348 speeding tickets have been written, and it started on December 17th. 2 weapon charges, 3 firearms seized, 14 warrants, and 6 on-view felonies, 3 distracted drivers, and 84 other offenses were identified in this short time. It's just a little bit over a month, and we're already seeing those numbers. And it's mainly functioned by the Special Operations Division, but also every precinct is contributing as well. Next slide. Again, I mentioned this earlier, 28 collision fatalities in 2022. This plan was based upon that analysis. We looked at the high injury network. We also looked at where our fatal crashes are occurring, and also where the citizens are complaining about speeding. So we have a top 10 list for all 4 precincts, similar to the gun violence plan. But this is based upon speeding, and it's using data, but it's also using input from the community and from our city council folks who are representing their community about where they're seeing speeding. So if I have one call to action for the community, I just got to say this, and I think it came through earlier, but I hope it's obvious. We need to lock our vehicles in Richmond. We say it all the time, but locking your vehicle is the best defense against someone stealing any property of yours. And we're begging our community to stop leaving guns in cars, whether it's locked or unlocked. Even if you lock the glove box, people can get into it. The Second Amendment's a right. It's also a responsibility. So we expect people, if they're going to have, if they have their guns, to treat it with the responsibility that it requires. If you see something, say something. And again, what I'd ask from the community every time I talk in front of people, there are people that you may know in your life that want to start a different start, that may be bored in their current job. Maybe you're a reporter who want a different experience in life. We're hiring, and we need great people. And like I mentioned earlier, the Richmond Police Department is a diverse agency, not just racially and ethnically and all that. It's also diversity of ideas, and it's a fun place to work, and it's a great working environment. And we just would encourage anyone who has an interest to come do a ride along with our officers. We've started that back up since COVID. We had to curtail it a bit, but that's the best advertisement I can do. It's not what I'm saying about the Richmond Police Department. It's you getting to experience it yourself as a passenger in a patrol car with one of our great officers. So that's what I've got, and I'm happy to take some questions. Henry?
Just 2 questions. One, can you update us on excuse me, the shootings from yesterday and kind of where we stand on those unfortunate events? And then also on technology, I know you talked about the license plate readers, but did I also hear at a meeting recently that you all are maybe going to invest in technology for sound, so you can maybe triangulate gunshots? Could you maybe talk a little bit about that too?
Sure. Well, first, for the updates of the shootings, we have 1 homicide on Maury Avenue where we have 2 individuals that were suspects in that case, shot an older male while he was leaning into their car. That was the 3400 block of Maury Street. And then last night, right off Forest Hill on Belmont, we had a shooting. The first one is classified as a murder at this point. The second one is classified as a non-fatal shooting and a death investigation. It still needs more investigation before we can tell the legality of that specific shooting. But the person who was injured in that shooting is in stable condition, but still life-threatening.
And then just on the sound technology?
Sure. What you're talking about is gunshot detection. So there's plenty of companies that are doing that, and we're exploring that space. It's a very expensive technology, but I can tell you when I talk with folks, the frustration they have of saying, I'm hearing gunfire, but we can't exactly pinpoint where it is. That technology gives you a lat and longitude of where that gunfire is. And the benefit of it is not just that you're able to respond exactly where it occurred. The benefit is that we'll know exactly where those cartridge casings are to put in our NIBIN machine. So many times our officers respond to a scene of gunfire, no one's hit, we don't know exactly where it occurred. The good officers will spend some time looking for it, but not everyone can find the casings. So to be able to go to the exact space, collect those casings, and it may link to another investigation we already have going, and that case might not have leads, but this one could. So it's something we're exploring. It is costly, but we're examining that. Yes?
I'm going to tell you about my experience with shot spotters sometime. Glock switches. So that was fascinating. First of all, how do citizens help? Second of all, what else can you guys do about them? You know, you talk about a 3D printer, that's kind of terrifying.
Yes.
You know, where do these people get? Anything you can tell us about those? And also, just questions about your core mission or your core values and the new mission statement. Particularly, what are you doing to train kind of, you know, from your patrol officers up? Like, how do you get buy-in from those officers on this new revamped mission? And you know, if you have a new mission statement, how'd that come about? Who had the input? If you could shed some light on that.
Okay, I'll talk about the Glock switches first. That is something that is very difficult for us to stop on the supply side. They're very easy to manufacture. Like you said, 3D printers. My son has a $300 3D printer that could probably make one. But one thing I would let the community know, and when we arrest folks with them, some of them don't realize it's illegal. It's not only illegal by state law, but every Glock switch we recover on a gun off of an individual, we will present that to the U.S. Attorney and the ATF. We think that federal prosecution for having essentially a hand machine gun is warranted. The concern I have about that is, you know, obviously any gun can kill someone, but almost the worst part about the Glock switches are you may not even want to kill the person you kill. I could be aiming at you and it jumps everywhere. It's not designed to be accurate, so it's not even a good self-defense tool. So it's you know, I have no sympathy for people who put that on their weapons, and if they're caught with it in Richmond, we're gonna charge them statewide, and then we're gonna refer them to the U.S. Attorney for evaluation, because I think that it's such a problem. You get innocent people killed, and you know, I don't know why it's even able to work on Glock. I would hope that they would manufacture something to stop it, but it exists, so we have to deal with it as it is. And it's important to note too that it's not just we can charge you with possession of a machine gun just with the auto sear, with the Glock switch itself, without a gun. That is the machine gun. So we will charge people who have that in their possession even without it being attached to a Glock. So that's important to note. When you talk about the mission statement and the core values, that was important to me when I came in. That's something traditionally the RPD has done. I can tell you that there's been no pushback from our officers. We included them. Obviously the command staff collaborated on that for weeks. We brought in our Grace, my administrative assistant, was in the room with us. I wanted her perspective because she has a good perspective on policing, but also just the average citizen. And we wanted to do something that was inclusive and that set what we in the Richmond Police Department really value. And I can tell you the feedback I've gotten from the officers is they want to know what success looks like. They want to know what their supervision wants of them. And that was something that came loud and clear from them to me. And that's why it was so important to me to get that out within a couple weeks.
Has there been training for those officers? Like, okay, here's what our core values are, and here's what, you know, core value 1 really means in real life.
Yes. Well, we use examples of that. I do a weekly email to the troops. The other thing they wanted from me was more communication about what's going on in the organization. So I always look for those examples of it. When someone gets a great hit on a Glock switch, or I'm sorry, on an LPR, when they find a stolen vehicle that way, I'll note that in my weekly email and say, Officer so-and-so caught this person, great use of technology. And then I kind of shame the ones who aren't up to date on how to use Flock, because it's available to all of our officers. Every officer's issued a smartphone, and it's just a matter of putting that app on the phone. We have a train the trainer that is more than welcome to meet with officers to train them how to use it and how to use it within our policy. So that's how we do it. We're constantly talking about it. We give examples in those emails, and it's pushed out through the roll call. So understanding what's expected of them is something that I think they've really latched on to in the last 3 months.
Sorry, Flock is new this year?
Yes.
Chief, what would you say had the biggest impact on pushing the number of homicides last year?
Well, like I said, I think that analysis, it started in the summer. We were on track to have another really bad year, so that's why the initiative was started, and myself and Major Elamine were put in charge of it. And so what we wanted to do is, like I said, look at those data points where we just kind of made that up on our own. What do we think leads to homicide? And it's those 5 crimes we talked about with a gun. And we wanted to know where they were occurring, and we did it not just for this past year, because sometimes that can be movable. When we met with our crime analysts, they said the best practice is to go back 5 years. So find those locations. And then what I want to stop is, not every officer is going to be a SWAT team member or a homicide detective or even has the interest or inclination to do that. But every officer can participate in our deterrent strategy. So that's what I think, putting those officers in those hot spots at the right time of day, on the right days of the week, we think that made a difference. So that's why we wanted to continue it. The way we tweaked it, though, was to give every precinct buy-in. Like I said last time, the majority of those locations were in 1st Precinct, where we saw the greatest reductions. We didn't see the same reductions in the other precincts, so we met with the inventor of the hotspot curve, a guy named Dr. Coper, who works out of George Mason, and PSP set us up with him. We reviewed our plan with him. He's a nationally recognized criminologist, and we talked through our plan about, how we're going to utilize these deterrent strategies, and he reviewed it, had some notes for us, some very minor tweaks, and we went forward with it. In 90 days, we're going to meet back up with Dr. Coper and really kind of talk about what we're seeing in the near term. So.
You spoke about people stealing weapons from cars. Can you tell us the ratio of juveniles doing that versus adults? And then also, other question on arson, up by 87%. Are you seeing this in one specific area, spread out throughout the city? If you could explain that.
Sure. So I'll talk about the arsons first. That is a big increase for this year, but it's, when we look at the threshold reports for 5 years, it's kind of in line. We had a low year last year. We obviously had a big year in 2020, but that's not out of line. It's all over the city when we do the heat maps. There was one individual who did 4. That was a juvenile that we caught, but the rest of them seem to be trash cans or cars, and it's spread out throughout the city. I'm sorry, what was your first question?
The first question was about the ratio of juveniles to adults stealing weapons from unmarked cars.
Very challenging for us to, the other thing I failed to mention on the challenge for us with theft from motor vehicles are, it's a very hard crime to solve, and it's a very hard crime. Our officer could be sitting right next to someone. If we have one of our young folks walk up to a door, open it, pick something out of it, a computer bag or whatever, and walk off, he could be committing a crime right in front of us. We wouldn't know it because he didn't smash the window, and nothing would look out of place. So when we see those, so the true answer with that is, there's many of those cases that go unsolved, so we don't know who's actually doing it. But when we look at the videos from Ring cameras and from the other surveillance videos, what we generally see is groups of young folks walking up and down the street, pulling on every door handle. And sometimes we'll see older folks doing it too, but it seems like, several members of the youthful community, these are folks that will not smash a window. They're not willing to take that step, but many of them think nothing of the step of just pulling on a door handle and keep walking. So it's very hard for us to tell how many are young, but just anecdotally, I would say it's probably the majority. And the other problem with it is, success in that business leads to more success for the thieves. So every gun they take encourages them to, there might be a gun in this neighborhood. And that's where you see, you know, in the previous year, when we did our heat map on theft for motor vehicles and guns, it was the majority were in sector 413. Yeah. So there was a big club called Main Stage, has a lot of people, a lot of folks coming there, and we were just getting hammered with gun thefts there, and that was the focus point now. This year, it's all in the Shockoe Bottom. It's bright red when you look at the heat map, and then the other locations where we're seeing large groups of people coming to our city with those new apartments and maybe just aren't used to urban living yet. So, thank you.
Anything else?
Another one if nobody else does.
That's fine.
Just Chief, you were talking about crime in our public housing courts, and I know Richmond Redevelopment Housing Authority is trying to push forward a plan to have some of its own police force in those communities. What are your general thoughts on that? And I know some of that is also done in tandem with you all. So is there an update kind of where that might stand?
Well, I'll leave the specifics to CEO Naismith, but we have discussed it preliminarily. My understanding is that it's going to start with a security company that has worked in public housing communities before, Armed Security, and we look forward to that. We'd love to partner with a professional security company to help maximize resources in those communities. I don't know if he's going. I know that if he were to start up a police department, it's very complicated to do that. But if he does, we're happy to help and support in any way we can.
Sorry, one more question. You talked a lot about crime analysts, and I'm just curious. You said you're hiring some. Do you already have some in-house? And you talked about them doing things like breaking down micro areas. Just curious about what kind of like continued professional development they do, and where does this, you know, it sounds like a whole bunch of new initiatives or newer initiatives, and really just kind of taking a, I don't want to say academic approach, but you're looking at a broader picture of crime, and so where does that come from?
Well, we've always had crime analysts and some of the best in the business. The challenge for us is that they often leave. So they get a lot of great experience here, and then they go work in the private sector and make double, triple the salary. So, but we're hiring for crime analysts, and we're also going to be hiring for the crime analyst supervisor. So, and when we do that, again, I'll mention PSP. What I'm going to do is send that crime analysis supervisor and new folks to one of these cities that has a great program already. I know there's one in Milwaukee that I was impressed with, but we'll talk to our partners in the public safety partnership and find the right place to go so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of the recommendations that we found during our assessment was just some things that we can tweak right off the bat. As far as centralizing them, getting everyone in the same room, and as to your point, training and continuing education, because the technology is constantly changing. The records management systems are always changing, so it's important for them to be cutting edge.
What do they need qualifications-wise to apply?
Right now it's,
Yeah.
high school diploma. So I don't know if we require a college degree for that, but
There's a bunch of postings on our website,
Yep.
free, that you can check out and get all the details for each of the positions and the civilian roles that are also, we're also hiring for. So thank you, Chief.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.